So, new banners, this is the episode we have been wanting to do for about 5 years, and he's never agreed until now. We don't know
You've
why.
never asked. You've never asked.
But we're going to try and cover as many topics as we can. Doesn't need any introduction. The father of running podcasts, Martin Yelling. Sorry, Dr. Martin Yelling. Dr. Martin Yelling.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. Wait, we weren't aware of the doctor bit.
Really? I bet you're less aware of this. My wife, Liz, is also doctor.
And was she always a doctor, or she become a doctor since competing?
I am going to get in trouble because, so I studied for mine. She was. You know where this is going, right? Let's just assume nobody's listening.
Don't have to assume that.
Just
use this. This is to get out the stuff that you wanted to say.
Let's just vent 30 years of marriage frustration right now. I did my doctorate in physical activity promotion and education policy, and Liz ran and got given one. So there you go.
Who did she get hers given by?
Bournemouth University.
Bournemouth.
University of Bournemouth.
Are you giving it in a topic, honorary ones, or is it just a generic, you've got an honorary degree?
She was given hers by the School of, I can't remember, Health and Wellbeing. It's given for like contributions to. So she got hers for contributions to running, I think, or the world of sport. Yeah.
Wow. And did you go to...
She's an honorary doctorate.
Did you go with her? And
Yeah. I never went to my own doctorate. I never went to my own, but I went to watch Liz get her free one.
And did you slow clap from the back? Yeah. Just
jogging around for a few years, you get given a floppy hat. What's it like? How hard?
So there's hope. Anyway. There's hope for us all. Well,
so I don't use that very often. But a kind of previous life was I guess it is important though, because when I was doing my doctorate, I learned a lot about behavior change, and I learned a lot about what motivates people, and I learned a lot particularly around how to shape and support people through change, particularly children, but also adults. And of course, when I started getting more into running stuff, a lot of that I put into play in coaching and in helping people improve their running. So yeah, it's kind of all an interwoven journey, really.
Was that always your intention with it?
I didn't have a clue. No. I was one of those. I still am. I'm 51. I still don't know what I want to do. So
yeah, I hear you.
My dad still says to me, "When are you going to get a job?"
He probably doesn't. Does he not understand what podcasts are yet? Is he still? Are you still fiddling around with that audio thing, or?
I think if I was an accountant, he'd get it. But when are you going to get a job? I have got a job, I think.
And so if because I'd say a lot of our listeners go through waves of motivation, and probably on the less healthy side of runners than some other podcasts, should we say? Like
less motivated,
if you were to use that change management, what kind of tips would you give to people in how they can actually?
So that's changed quite a lot actually over the years. As my own thinking and awareness of what it takes to keep people on a journey has changed. It's really important actually now, because people, it's quite natural for motivation to ebb and flow. It's quite normal. And in fact, you should encourage it. If you don't encourage it, you tend to settle for mediocrity all the time. And that's what we see with a lot of runners. They often think more is better. So they'll batter themselves senseless for a short period of time, get injured, ill, demotivated. And also runners play like really weird games with themselves about how good they think they are or they're not. And it's simply not healthy for their own emotional state. So actually I love to, if I'm coaching somebody, I'll purposefully play with their motivations so that I can help them experience what it's like when emotions are low, and motivation is low. So they
you gaslight your clients.
Yeah, well, kind of. So they regulate. They then learn to regulate. and they learn to push through different periods of tricky running, so often, and I know that people that listen to your show would perhaps call themselves, in proper running enthusiasts, like they're proper into it. And if the wheels come off and they're proper out of it, that can cause in some cases, some fairly significant discomfort in their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
They become bloody miserable, and they become miserable to everybody around them. And the reality is that you should be able to manage it yourself, whether you can or cannot run. And then once you can learn how to do that, when you cannot run, I count myself in that category, by the way. I'm one of those. I'm like miserable if I can't go outside and get some air in the sunshine and move when I'm doing it. But the reality is that motivation can stay higher when you focus on different things at different times, and you use your running in a way that it benefits and serves you at that moment in time. And that should change. It should change. It changes on your season of life. It changes on your event aspirations. It should change, and you should be able to deal with and tolerate it. And the reason you become pissed at yourself and other people get annoyed around you is because you can't. And that's the core, and that's what's hard for some runners to understand. Does that answer the question without being too waffly?
But say you've you're running well, you're running healthily. How do you test that? Like when you say you almost put
tweak the motivation.
How do you test your being in that low when you're still running and like get the balance of external...
So it depends on the individual. So sometimes it's about teaching them to tolerate and experience discomfort, and can they still stay motivated? So it might be a longer run or a faster run or back-to-back runs. It depends on them. And at other times, and this is often much harder for runners to do, it's about getting them to do less. So, it's about getting them to take the foot off the pedal before they think they need to. But I think they need to. So I will set, in coaching, I'll set less training. They'll be like, yeah, but I'm flying. I'll be like, yeah, exactly right. And that's why if you want to take another step up and keep your motivation, we're just going to take the foot off the gas now. Yeah, but I don't want to. Makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't care. Like what I want you to do is to be better in the longer term, to be a healthier runner. Everything that means, a healthier runner isn't necessarily a faster runner.
Have you ever met a runner or gone to coach him and stuff who has been good at that? Or is it the case
taking rest?
Well, knowing when to dial it down, knowing when when to make those decisions before it becomes a problem. I mean, can people actually?
So you can learn.
I think to a decent level.
You can learn that, definitely. My goal when I, doing a lot more coaching is always to be out of a job. Actually, like a coach's role should be to create independence, not dependence. And I would say if you ever meet a coach that wants to create dependence, like you just need to flick them the bird and lose it, like go elsewhere. A coach's role is to give you strength and full independence and ownership of your own running. And so, sometimes you meet people who are better at that. They're better at knowing them enough about themselves to back off when they need it and before they need it. And sometimes you meet people who are terrible at it. And it takes them a longer journey of discovery around why they run and what they're running for before they learn that. So the other thing about motivation and this particular journey is that a few years ago, we piped on about this for ages on Marathon Talk, like trusting the process. Oh, sorry, that'll be the dog. That's the dog again. And again. Trusting the process. And again. This is audio nightmare for you guys.
No. We don't mind dogs at
audio
all.
Gold.
We love it. Yeah.
Is he disagreeing? Is he
I'm saying stop. When you really understand the flow and the process of your own running and what motivates you and makes you tick, you have no trouble at all. You don't feel guilty when you back off because you know it's for a purpose and you know it's for a reason. And then when you do that, you're much more comfortable with it. and that's a point of understanding in why you run, as opposed to just ticking off a run every day.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's almost a trap where should you get injured or should you fall behind the fitness you want, you almost then, the idea of backing off becomes so distant because you want to catch up and you want to make up for time. And if you've got these injuries,
particularly if you're very outcome focused. So if you're outcome or performance orientated and you're singular, so a singular mindset's really important. My wife used to do loads of running and she had a pretty singular mindset about what she wanted to achieve. But at the same time, she had a broader mindset about how to achieve it. She's coming in now with shopping. So this is now like, do you remember when you go to every single guest that you've ever podcast interviewed, you say, can you please try and be in a nice, quiet environment with nothing going on in the background?
We don't say that. No, we don't say that.
We don't say that.
We like the distractions.
Yeah. The best time is when the drug testers turned up for one of them. So,
So you've got like a barking dog and look, I'll just do this. There you go. You've got Liz carrying shopping. How about that?
We want to know what's in the bag. We want to see what the presents
You want to see the annual shop.
What are the worst foods you've got in there? Like the guilty secrets?
Well, we've got mulled wine. Everyone loves a Christmas mulled wine.
Absolutely.
Go through the shopping basket.
Generation games.
Yeah. We've got potatoes. Roast potatoes.
So properly preparing.
Is that
for...
finest?
Oh, this looks good. Looks good. You're going to like this.
What is it? Oh, wow.
Okay.
Oh, that's you're hosting. You're hosting, are you?
Oh, this is better. You're going to love this. This is like, let's unpack shopping on an audio podcast.
This is incredible podcast.
And to switch everybody off. So this next item, let's see who can
what
guess
do you think it's going to be?
What this next item is. Right. You both, Dave, you've got a guess. I'm going to give you a guess.
Oh, cuddly toy.
So what's in Liz Yelling's shopping?
I think it's amusing mince pies.
Is it a tub of lard? A tub of lard. It's like guilty. She just spoons lard.
I'll tell you what, ready? You're not far. Look at that.
Oh, donuts.
Not just any ordinary donut, though. They've got like hundreds of thousands on top of the icing.
How long would those donuts last?
And I'll find those donuts. Well, we've got 3 kids and there's 4 donuts. So when the kids get home from school, they'll last maybe 10 seconds. And a gin glass. There you go. That's the extent of the shopping.
Gin glass.
So there's a fight between you two for the last donut.
Yeah, Liz will probably have that, donut and chips. I'm going to do another professional podcasting thing here right now. And I know you won't edit any of this out at all.
No, not at all. No.
I need a power cable. I've run out of power, look.
So I did that.
It's in my bag, Liz.
I did that with our first sponsored podcast from ONCC this week, and everything went wrong. So,
classic. We've got so many stories like that. We did an interview with the head of BBC Sport at London 2012, and Tom forgot to press record. Genius.
Oh, that is the worst, isn't it?
And I'm sure they weren't busy at the time. They could come back. They
had nothing going on.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what have been like the things that have gone wrong that the listeners wouldn't know about?
There's millions of things. I mean, you guys podcast, there's thousands and thousands of things that have gone wrong. We first started Marathon Talk back in 2010.
Yeah.
And nobody was really doing a running nobody was doing podcasting really. And we had to learn how to podcast. We had to learn the audio setup. And now you get podcasting platforms and you get, you get instructions on how to record and your guests and it's a completely different environment now.
But you guys made it super difficult for yourself by giving an expectation of professionalistion, which is something we've never done.
Yeah,
so in some ways,
if you start poorly, then even a slight improvement on that is progress.
We sort of did in that we had a few podcasting fundamentals that we made up at the time. And now what we know is that, they're the mainstay of many successful podcasts. Whereas Tom and I were literally, Tom was my co-founder at Marathon Talk and is now the COO of Park Run and has been a great friend for many years. And we wanted to make up some principles that we felt would make a good podcast. And one of the things was that we wanted to make it regularly. And we felt like people would benefit something which was regular. So we thought, well, we'll do it weekly. Just plucked it out of midair. I mean, what a ball ache. After years and years and years, the pressure sometimes that we felt, particularly in the early days when we didn't know how to do things, of churning content. And this was also before the era of social content, really. Yeah. And we were writing scripts, show notes. We were designing show notes. We were engaging community, and we didn't really know what we were doing with that element either. So we were building challenges, digital challenges. We were building events. We were, trying to engage people with the show and try and bring them along on the journey. And the simple thing was, we wanted to do it regularly. So we said, we'll do it every week and we'll release it once a week. We wanted to make the audio quality good enough so it wasn't a total pain to listen to. That's probably me, because I hate it when I can't hear something. The radio's not tuned in well enough. Like when you listen to somebody and they've got like the world's most annoying voice. Hopefully that's not
I have to do it every week.
That's our laughs.
Yeah, so you have somebody on, you think, I just can't listen to it. So we wanted to and then we wanted to make the content something that people felt like they could engage with in an informal and friendly way, yet it also being not educational, because that sounds a bit too posh for
useful.
Just useful engaging useful content. And that was the principles that we set up.
Well, what was the reason? Well, I mean, because normally people do something for a reason. Was there something that was a particular trigger that made you think, let's do this now on this? We didn't know.
Yeah, so I think that was largely me. So I'd written, I spent time writing for magazines before that, and just in print media around running, and the churn and the turnover was used to have to write. So you'd get a commission like 3 months before it was due, and you'd try and plan the year based on what do we need to be talking about in February, and it's like September.
Yeah.
And you'd write the content, you'd have to submit it to the editor, and then you'd have to engage with the backwards and forwards, and then you would, by the time the magazine hit the shelves, and you'd nip off to your newsagent, to buy it, or you subscribe to it, written media. Sometimes the relevance of the copy had gone.
Yeah.
And so for podcasting, I hang on a second. I'm just going to have to say something to Liz. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Point. So Liz is about to make a Christmas wreath in the kitchen.
Oh.
Okay. And so
you've not gone to a Christmas wreath party? I thought that was the thing.
Is that like toga slash? So I'm just going to have to ask, because I know this is being recorded, that making a Christmas wreath while I kind of try and record a podcast with these guys is not ideal.
Are you going to wear the wreath at the end of the podcast?
Finished wreath. Just the wreath.
That's a calendar waiting to happen.
Yeah, here we go. She's now pacing the kitchen. I'm getting proper evil eyes and a grumpy face. But honestly, just give me a few moments. Otherwise, we've got you wreath making in the background.
No one gets between a woman and a wreath.
No. So if you can hear a running tap or cutting of tree, this is why.
That's absolutely fine.
We started it to turn over some of that content a little more quickly. It's like, well, let's have a conversation with people and let's try and do it digitally, and let's try and make it timely, topical, relevant, and quick. So if something happened at the weekend, great race, we wanted to record that content on a Monday, and we wanted to share it with you on a Wednesday. And that was how we did it for 10 years and 12 million downloads.
And how many, if you were to say kind of peak weeks, how many hours do you think, if you were to estimate,
so it changed?
The hardest weeks were? Yeah,
very much changed on what season we were in. So, and also how good we got at doing it. So when we first started, each show would take us 8 to 10 hours to edit.
Wow.
So we were doing all our own editing, and there was
Yeah.
we didn't really know what we were up to. So we'd listen to everything really clearly, and we'd adjust all the audio levels, and we'd take out all the things that were not and we learnt in how to edit. And then we got other people to edit, which obviously took away that time. As we became a little bit more established, we didn't need to do the editing. That was largely because we had an amazing volunteer community who said, well, I'd like to learn how to edit. So we showed them how to do it. And they came to us with no editing skills.
We didn't know one of your main editors is a do-badder who we've been on trips with to Beer Lovers Marathon together, and then it just turns out at the end of the marathon talk, it's like, oh yeah, I used to be the editor of that. Like, what?
Yeah.
We felt brutally stabbed in the heart.
Nah, like I'm also a huge fan of, like, particularly now with what I'm doing around the charity stuff. Like when you're on a shared mission and you have similar values, and you genuinely want people to live life in a fruitful, fun, enjoyable, social way, you have to do it collectively.
Yeah.
It's pointless doing it in conflict or in competition. You must do it collaboratively, and you must do it, and we always felt that in podcasting, which is why, if anybody ever came to us, and they did, we would show them, we'd say, sure, I'll help you learn how to record, and we worked with many other podcast producers that came to us and said, I want to start a running podcast. We were like, fine, we'll show you how to do it. We got some help in the early days from the guys at IM Talk.
Oh yeah,
because they had, Bevan had this like triathlon podcast, and Tom and I were into triathlon at the time, and we thought, why not do something for running? So yeah, that was how it came about.
And how when you say you got like 12 minutes, like how, in terms of its growth, like,
by the way,
I mean, like 12 minutes insane, like
yeah.
In terms of its growth, then, like when would you say that it kind of really kind of hit its stride in terms of, like, was that growth kind of like small and got bigger and bigger, or did it go along for it and then just went boom?
No, it's like pretty steady, I would say. In the early days, we rose quickly to like a few thousand listeners each week, just because there was not a lot else.
Yeah.
And the podcasting market now is very different, because people actually have they have more choice, which is good, around what they want to listen to. Choice is a really good thing to have. And back then it was like Marathon Talk, or sometimes a few other podcasts came and went.
Yeah.
And that's crucial. It's just for listenership, you have to build a good listener base. My view is you have to be really authentic, and I don't mean like wanky Instagram authentic. I don't mean you should. I don't mean you should try and be authentic. I've had this bugbear for many years around people trying to be authentic. Inherently, in trying to be authentic, you are not authentic. You're being inauthentic. Weird, isn't it?
Even the notion that you have to try to.
We've got to make this. It's sold as a strategy, isn't it? You're like,
yeah, you've got to make this look authentic. Well, then just do it. You can't make it look authentic. Just make it authentic. And so that was something that Tom and I wanted to do. And so the way we did that to build that listener base was we spoke about things that were happening in our life, things that would connect people listening. Like if we were to go to the pub, or out for lunch today, we talk about normal things. And that's so important, because when people listen, although they're coming to you for content, they want it to be credible, they want it to be trusted, they want it to be authentic, and they want it to be real. And the only way you can be real is if you talk from the heart about things that matter. And so that's what we did. And that's still the case.
And did you, because we're quite weird in that I've been injured for 3 years. Jody's been injured for for his whole life, it seems. So we almost authentically aren't running for the majority of our content.
We're catering for the excuses, the reasons, and everything else. That's it. It's
because were you presented with challenges throughout that journey where you were struggling to actually cross over with your life and the podcast, or
I
have you
always? Yeah, there's always challenges to the way you do things, and that's certainly been the way for me. Yeah, always. And so I've spoken about this quite a lot around one of the amazing benefits of running is that if you know how to harness it to benefit your life, it can benefit you in different ways throughout the seasons of your life that will change, and they do, And so for me, when I was performance running, trying to run as fast as I possibly could, and my wife was training for the Olympic Games, like our house, we had no kids. The way in which we engaged with running was significantly different to the way in which we engage with it now. And the challenges we faced were not, how am I going to fit my run in today, if at all? It was like, okay, how fast does this single mile of 6 need to be? And now that was what we needed to do then. But now it's completely different. We've got 3 kids, very busy home life. And we still love to go running, but we'll just run together. We'll run a bit, we'll walk, we'll have a coffee in the same run. We'll grab a coffee mid-run. And I learned that from cycling. I used to be doing loads of road cycling. And it was just common to stop and have a coffee. It's like second nature. In fact, we used to ride to a cafe. I used to do a lot of riding in Italy with a team in France. And we'd go riding and we'd have coffee. And of course, in running, just didn't do that at all. It was like, I've swum to boats and had coffee. In running, you didn't do it. Nobody did it. They went for this. Now I do it all the time. And I love encouraging people to go, think about what you need from your run in any season that you're in and capitalize on that and take it. So, like you guys, even if you're injured, there'll be some things in which you can still do, even if it isn't running.
Run to the pub, run to another pub. I mean, that's quite a common thing, isn't it?
And in terms of, I guess, your most relationship with the podcast, because there are times when you're just super excited about guests and like anyone as an interviewer or as a host, and there are other times where it does become more of a chore and a burden. Like, how have you seen that ebb and flow, and how's that changed with different presenters?
The biggest thing was, in the early days, we were well up for it and we loved it, genuine, and we still love it, actually. And I think one of the major contributors was building the community and the challenges. So you guys probably don't remember, but we built a couple of things which made huge differences to us and to other people. Something called Jantastic, which was, it was the first running digital challenge, virtual running challenge, pre any other. And we built a platform like with Guru Greg, who happened to help us with our website, an amazing guy called Greg Brock, who was involved early on in the show. And I had this idea that I wanted to, it came from my behavior change background. I wanted to change people's behaviors through their running, and I didn't quite know how to do it, but I also wanted them to stick to their running, right? And I wanted them to improve whatever their goal was in their running and stay motivated to do it. So it was like a next level training program. And it just challenged you to stick to some frequency. So it was meant to be a motivation challenge. And we called it Jantastic. And we built a platform that enabled people to log their runs. And then we challenged them for 12 weeks because that's the amount of time, really. If you can stick to something for 12 weeks, it's made a positive behavior change in your life. And I'd learned that through research, but it wasn't really done in running, right? It was done because 12 weeks was like this objective amount of time that you need to get ready for a marathon. So I flipped it round and said, no, that's the time that if you stick doing this, it'll have positive impact on your life in the longer term. So we built Jantastic as a platform, and then we challenged people to do it. And we got 30,000 people running 500,000 times in 2013, right? So almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And Strava picked up on it. And we became the first Strava integration, which was, at the time, fantastic. We worked quite closely with them to understand how to pick up on runner behaviors in the UK market. And now, of course, you'll see that Strava regularly run running challenges that are much bigger than the one we ever did.
And do you think, is there an element when you look back and think, if I'd had more time, maybe we could have spun that into a new company or actually progressed it into a business?
Well, I did, to be fair and to be super transparent, we did try. But actually, people were not ready.
No.
They just weren't ready. A little bit like, for the first few years of Marathon Talk, I had to explain what a podcast was. I had to explain what a virtual challenge was. I don't get it. Why would I want to do it virtually? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Why would I log a run? I don't get it. And I would be like trying to work my way through how I'd have to explain it. And of course, what we saw certainly, between 2013 and 2019 was a gradual growth in virtual engagement that social media enabled. And then we saw a massive growth and, in fact, a saturation in market of virtual type challenges. And now I think there's a bit of a problem, really, around that market, and it needs a bit of redefinition. It's boring now, because it's been overdone. It needs to be done differently
and co-opted by
I
think and things like that. Yeah, that's the
we did Jantastic for a reason. We did it because we wanted to help people stick to a running plan, and that was why we did it. And now, unfortunately, sometimes it's done to try and flog you something. So that was one thing. And the other thing we did was we set up events.
Martin, before we continue, Martin, the light in the room is just starting to cut across your face slightly. So
sorry,
this
is a really hard place for me to sit.
No, that's fine. It's just I'm sure when it comes out, you don't want to see that half of you're going to look kind like
I don't mind.
Your face. That's right.
Adamant.
Adamant. Yeah, that's it. There we go.
So I sit here and bang on a bit more.
And then, talking about the rise of social media, because we get quite a few requests for guests. You must get so many more. And what's your observation been on what is almost story-worthy and people's perception of how why their motivation?
So that's a great question, actually. And so I have to answer this with reasonable tact. Some people think they're better guests than they actually are.
Yeah.
And I don't proclaim to be an amazing guest at all, but I've certainly, I've done over 600 episodes and I've interviewed a lot of people. And often the people that come to you with a great story, the reason they want to be on the show is it's just for their own, self-promotion. And sometimes that story isn't very interesting at all. Sometimes it is, so for me, it was always about what do we think our listeners would like to hear around the ways in which running has supported someone's life, whatever that might be, and also makes a genuinely I would want to sit with you at the pub and you say to me, oh yeah, I'm a runner. All right. And you go, oh, okay, great. Okay. And then they go, I've done 2:59. I'm like, I'm asleep. I'm like, yeah. Okay, great. And then they start rattling on about sessions that they've done. I mean, fair enough. Or how many countries they've run in, or, it's like, yeah, right. actually, what makes a great story is, tell me about how running captivates you and supports you. Tell me about times in your life where running has been there for you. So some of our best stories have been with completely unknown people who just happen to run, and running has been so transformational for them and in their life that it makes an amazing story. Like I remember one guy called Bob Groves. It was years and years ago, and at the time, like the only people who people would chat to is elites. And we chatted to Bob Groves, and Bob used to be a cocaine addict, right? He was a taxi driver. And what fascinated me was the similarities around exercise addiction and drug addiction, right? And I've always been really interested in that anyway. And so talking to Bob was around how he found ways out of depression and anxiety and addiction through using running. And he was one of the first interviews for me that was a turning point in who I used to seek out. So I would seek out people to interview.
How did that first one come about? How did you find them? Why did you decide?
Through like my London Marathon work. So, I've been working for the London Marathon for many years in a sort of coaching advisory role. And so I would get to meet people, get to meet people at the event, and they would tell me, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm running for," and I'd ask them, "Well, why are you running for that organization?" And they would then tell me, and they'd tell me this personal story, and it's the personal story that it's so much more interesting. So I remember Shelley Gordon, talking about, like people whose, I think it was Shelley who like came to find her husband has taken his own life in the garden shed, and like how she used running to really help her process and wrestle those really challenging emotions. And that is way more interesting than you wanting my time and my network so that you can promote your own, and so I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in ways that running will help you in your life and help you connect.
And do you think that now with social media, people are more used to telling their story, but also people are more used to mining drama? And even if we look at something like X Factor, how it used to be, kid turns up, sings, yay. Now it's kid's grandma's got cancer. So do you think now that people are better at actually telling their story, or do you think people are almost finding stories where there weren't before and actually are
finding
almost
a hook? They're finding a hook to kind of get in on a conversation.
Yeah, people are almost creating dramas more than there being enough meat in it.
Again, doesn't that depend on a person? So, like, I'm a huge believer in integrity. Like, it's a personal value, and it's really important. It's really important to me. And your reputation takes you a lifetime to establish, and your character, and the things you want to represent through the thing that you do. Whether that's, whether you work in a hospital, as a nurse, and it's the way in which you work with the patients people that you care for, whether you work in palliative care and, looking after somebody before they die, whether you're a school teacher, bus driver, whatever it is you do, how you represent yourself when you do that is really important. And so I think you can see through when somebody isn't representing doorbell dog. Sorry. I remember this happened with Ryan Hall. We interviewed Ryan Hall, and his dog went crazy. And Tom and I were like, I don't believe it. Ryan Hall's dog's gone really mad, and now it's my dog.
Was that pre or post he became massive? Like he became a beast?
Yeah. That was pre, when he was like 208, 204, I think he ran. Yeah, 204. So yeah, look, sometimes there's story, and the story is amazing. I think you have to cut through what sits behind the need to tell that story. And if the need to tell that story is to benefit other people, then it's worth telling. If the need to tell that story is to benefit the person, then potentially it's not worth, depending on how they frame that benefit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I say on the flip side, like what I mean, this seems to be happening quite a lot. And again, it's always a case of, is this authentic or is this not? But celebrities, actors, singers, things using running almost as a brand extension. Like it's like they've done this thing, that. And now they're using running as this is the thing I'm doing. This is running, and there's sometimes there's something behind it, sometimes there isn't. But that seems to be happening more and more. Running is seen as something that they can add to their repertoire.
Well, it's because it is good. Running is inherently a good thing to do. Lots of, it is. And I've always been about trying to encourage more people to run. And, however, okay, so we're now unpacking the shopping. Right? So the wreath has been put away.
Oh, has the wreath been finished?
Has it been done? No, the wreath hasn't been started. I won that one. But the shopping is now going away. Right? So, yeah. We may have some Liz yelling background noise for genuine...
We're fine with it. We're absolutely fine with that. We can't hear anything. So
for genuine authenticity. So I'm about promoting running, and if somebody wants to go running, great, go running. Sometimes I think they might utilize it to leverage storytelling, but mostly I would try and search out interesting people with great stories. Sometimes it's people who have run really quick. One of the things on Marathon Talk was about trying to give, a long form voice to people who have really done amazing things with their running. And some of the guests we had on had done absolutely incredible things with their running, set world records, won Olympic titles, been stalwarts for decades. Chris Chataway, Bruce Tuller, amazing people. I never got to interview Roger Bannister, which would have been incredible. And I've never interviewed Seb Coe, which I'm or Steve Ovett. Both of those would be high on, kind of a personal agenda to speak to, but I never managed to speak to either of them either.
Well, I think with Seb, it'd be hard almost because there's so many things to talk about now, and the world of athletics and his involvement in it, and because actually this is something that I've heard from others that you've been quite cautious about some topics that you discuss on the podcast that we basically are walking into lawsuits in theory if anyone listens to hear them every day. But if you have no listeners,
you're okay. No listeners and no sponsors. That's the key.
I mean, have you? How do you feel about the state of athletics and running? And
so I think that point, to your point of careful, I think it's really important actually to be sensitive around sometimes what you do talk about. I don't mean that doesn't mean you have appropriate conversations about things that are going on. But, you for me and Tom, we would always try and talk about something without sensationalizing it. It's really important. And we've seen that in the news lately. People use information, and they'll use that information to try and modify behavior. And Tom and I were always cautious around being factual, and being truthful. And, perhaps sometimes we might dance a little with each other around opinion, but we would not, try and bring people down or, be offensive or, we just we never felt that was the place for the show. What do I feel about the status of athletics at the moment? I think it's gone through a very, very challenging period. Athletics and road running, actually. It's so much so that even me as an athletics fan, I'm 51. I've been running since I was 7, right? So I've been running loads. I've had every kind of level of experience of running, probably from, grassroots physical activity promotion, coaching kids, right through to Olympic Games and, world championships and all that kind of stuff. And I got a bit bored, a bit bored with the top end, particularly around our inability to connect with that top end, and the frustration, particularly around the lack of authentic performances and credible performances, and the validity of some of those performances were coming into question, and then the great work done around exposing, some of the methods that people would go to and some of the things people would do, and we certainly spoke about that. And, that clearly goes on and is still going on, just if you look at recent kind of Kenyan doping athletic integrity unit suspensions and doping violations and bans, it's still going on.
Do you think do you think we're just stuck in that system now?
No, I hope not. Absolutely not. I think so. One of the things I think we neglected for too long is genuine athlete welfare. And that's at every level. Athletes from African nations are, amazing human beings to be around, and clearly very talented, but often sometimes exploited.
Yeah,
and that shouldn't be allowed at any level. We should be celebrating shifts in performance. We shouldn't be seeking to, exploit that for at the detriment of that athlete welfare. And even that's the same in UK policy. We saw UK policy for a long time focused on performance and medals over almost anything else. And that was frustrating, particularly for me and Liz to see some of that. Now we're seeing a much needed shift in national governing body focus onto welfare. And we should see that. We should see that. It's really important.
And because, there's an element of, if you look, the
sun keeps going down and down. Like I have to keep getting further and further away and sitting higher and higher.
Because there's an element, if you look at, for example, Russian, Eastern German philosophy of throw enough people through a grinder and someone's going to come out as an absolute powerhouse. And that is almost the coaching. And if you hear some athletes like Steve Jones from the past, who would just be like, you do the miles, you're soft, you just, there's almost a conflict between athlete welfare and performance in some training methodologies.
Well, I don't think that needs to be the case, because they don't go hand in hand. And in fact, if you coach in that way, arguably you're doing a disservice to the people that you're coaching, because you don't understand that person well enough to value, you should value them as a person over their performance as an athlete. So I would much rather that somebody was a healthy, happy, human being, able to engage in positive, healthy relationships with other people and, have a great life, than they won a major championships and the rest of their life fell apart.
I guess that's the challenge, though. If you're a director of, you're targeted on medals, then actually your target isn't just happiness of athletes,
but that's your target, right? That's your perception of that target, and I don't think it's the right one. We at policy level, we should be reframing that. It comes back to process. If you focus on process and people, the performance should come. If it doesn't, well, it's okay, because at least you haven't broken someone in the process of doing so. We're seeing some very vocal, and right outpouring of dissent from athletes around practices. They should be calling it out. They should be calling out behaviors that put athletes at risk. It's
and
not good enough to go, if you look differently, if you behave like this, you will run faster. That's not good enough. It doesn't rub, and it shouldn't happen.
Now, quite a few of the questions coming in have been about the end of Marathon Talk, the resurrection of Marathon Talk. From how far out from the end of that first block did you start to think that actually you wanted to wind it down a bit?
That came through talking with Tom, actually. And then when Tom got busier and busier with Parkrun. And we had this conversation to say, Tom said, look, I'm just so busy. I need to give my energy. Parkrun is just accelerating. And it was, and rightly so. Tom had the opportunity to steer some of that. And he took it, at a time when Parkrun was growing. And that meant that pressures on him through the show were increasing. And so we said, why don't you step away? Which, he did. And then that was a point then for me to go, well, shall I stop? Should we just can the show at that point? But there was still I still felt like there was some interesting things happening. And so I said to Holly, do you fancy doing it for a bit? And she said, yeah, okay. And so we got on and like, we kind of enjoyed doing it and it became slicker. It just in terms of time. So the big thing for me was that Marathon Talk was, you guys know, a podcast is really hard to monetize. Although we weren't especially
Can you monetize them? What?
we weren't especially good at doing it. But it is quite hard at monetizing. We did have some great sponsors and partners and advertisers over the year, and we were always very careful with how we worked with them, in order to give people who are listening hopefully something of value. Was our basic premise. If it wasn't going to be of value to you, then it wasn't going to be on the show. So we may have had approaches for things like credit card checks, credit checks, and we were like, why? Whereas sometimes there might be a little startup running brand, and we thought, well, actually, that's a lovely thing to talk about. Yeah. So why don't we talk about it? And that would be great advertising, or a community. We did some of the first interviews with like Run Mummy Run, I think they're called.
Yeah. And,
we often interviewed early startups and help them, I guess, on that journey, because there was no other voice, even Parkrun. So when Tom shifted for Parkrun, there was 4 events. 4.
I didn't know it was that early that he came on board.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
4 events. And Tom was a volunteer Parkrun activator, and we used to talk about Parkrun on the show. And so as a result of that, Marathon Talk was a real voice for Parkrun, because people would get in touch with the show and go, what is this thing I hear, Parkrun? And they might be in Australia or Germany or the US or Canada or Basingstoke, and then they'd get in touch with Tom, and Tom would help activate a Parkrun where they were. And then, Holly and I did it for a bit, and actually I started getting busier with Stormbreak. The charity that I started, Kids Mental Health Charity. And I said to Holly, look, I don't think I can't do both. And so I said, let's just bring it to a close. And we were all happy with that. It was a bit tricky, to be fair, because it's 10 years of something we all love to do. And I thought, okay, I'm busier with Stormbreak. I'll just just chop it. And so that was what we did.
Was it part of your identity? Did it end up being like when it suddenly wasn't there? Did you feel differently about it than you expected to? Oh, nice.
Right. Yes. Okay, that right there is a fried egg sandwich.
Oh, I thought it was mango chutney. Oh, that's good.
No, that's ketchup. That's ketchup dripping off the side.
Oh, right. Nice.
Yeah, so I'm now going to podcast.
It's just magically appeared.
I like that. It slid across the table.
Yeah. Fried egg.
Amazing. Get it in. Get it in.
There we go. This is even more professional podcasting.
Yeah.
Did it feel like a bit of an identity? I guess it did, but I've always run. So, running is taking its various forms, whether I'm running coach, London Marathon, oh yeah, Facebook Live, oh yeah, or Marathon Talk. So it wasn't that challenging actually to step away. I was so busy with Stormbreak that recording every other week, we shifted to every other week to try and make it a bit easier. It was getting harder and harder. Writing the show, prepping the show, it's just getting harder. So I didn't mind a break at all.
And has it changed your relationship with Dan a bit? Because it is a marriage to be
with Tom.
Involved.
Do you mean Tom?
Sorry, Tom. What are we about? What? Sorry.
Yeah, who's Dan? Sorry. Dan. You're telling me is this someone I don't know?
Dad brain. Sorry. Has it changed your relationship with Tom a bit?
I hate the bloke now. Yeah. If I see him, I'm just going to knock him out. Can't stand him. I've always found him really annoying anyway. So to get away from him.
Because if Jody and I, sometimes Jody and I will go out for a beer, and it's almost quite strange because we'll have conversations about things that we talk so much to each other, but we'll suddenly talk about things that we never would talk about on the podcast, and it's almost a different connection.
Yeah, it is weird. Like I speak to David like this, more after my family. You're the person I speak to the most of anyone else on the planet. Yeah. Weirdly, a lot of that time we're not actually sharing a lot of stuff. There's other stuff that sits beneath it. So you have a relationship with someone, but you then need to go out and see them separately in order to then talk about the other things as well. So it's a funny relationship.
And I look, Tom and I have a really great friendship actually. I'd do anything for Tom, and we go back a long way now. And just because we don't do a podcast together anymore doesn't mean we don't have a great friendship. Like you guys, I spoke to Tom, in the early days of the show almost every day. And we'd get really excited about, the guest, or really excited about the new website, or really excited about another challenge. But, I actually think it's also quite healthy to, go through changes in your life and experience different things and expose yourself to different things and different people, and put yourself in different and challenging and sometimes uncomfortable situations. I could phone up Tom now and have a lovely open conversation with him about absolutely anything, and it'd be just like recording the show. We could go and record another episode and we'd have a right laugh. It would be hilarious and we'd love it, much like you guys. But sometimes you just kind of move through your life in a way that comes to an end, and you've got to be okay with that. That's the same with people that run and they can't find a way to fill that void. But you should learn to fill that void, because we're lucky we're able to run right now, and I hope I can run for many years in the future, but I may not be able to. And my kind of life competency comes from being okay with that. And so I'm okay with not speaking to Tom every day.
But what about the listeners? Like, when that happened, like, did you get any? Because I imagine, like, in the same way that running becomes a regularity for people rely on it. Also, over that amount of time,
or even changing hosts
for 10 years,
that kind of change.
Or even change. But people kind of rely on it, and so it was there. What were there people like begging you to carry on? Like, what was the kind of the general feeling that you got from people? Obviously, like, everyone was really sad about it, but for some people, I imagine that it's something that they rely on.
It's like when the Queen died. You're like, you didn't expect your life would ever be without it.
Yeah, we had a few, but I would come back to saying, if you're relying on it, you should be doing something else. Like, none of us should be in a position of generating reliance. We should be, we shouldn't be. We should be about generating freedom from things, and people should be listening because they want to, not because they feel like they have to, or they should, or they're reliant on something. They should listen because it's enjoyable and fun, and it brings something joyful and nourishing to this.
Oh, have I gone?
We're back. No, you went. Damn it, we got this far with almost no end.
And when you've had two new hosts now. You've had co-hosts like Laura over time as well.
Yeah.
Does that do you almost have to feel each other out in how you converse to actually find a rhythm, or like how do you actually, how hard is it, and how have you found it adapting?
I think obviously there was a real natural flow with Tom and I, and I loved that, and I still miss that element of it. And you do, when you work with somebody new in anything you do, you have a responsibility to sort of shift yourself actually to make that, they don't necessarily have to come towards you. You need to go towards them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might have to change the way in which you do things, or your expectations, or your sort of feelings around what you think your objectives are. And that has to change. So I was never expecting to do the show again. Actually, I'd kind of put it to bed. And I wasn't expecting the opportunity to emerge to do it again. And so when it did, I was like, okay, that's kind of struck me as something I really wasn't expecting. And there's two reasons I did it. One, again, being very transparent, is the Abbott, the main sponsor, now take care of all the costs of the show. So I don't have to do it. And that's a pressure. That's a pressure on yourself when you're doing a million other things. That's a real pressure. So that got taken away, and it's like a lifted weight. It's like, I can still talk about some of the things I love to talk about, but I don't have to respond to the emails. I don't have to do the socials. I don't have to publish the show like at midnight when I'm absolutely exhausted, from a day at work. I don't have to do any of that. So the whole process is so much easier. And because I'm not doing as much. And the second thing is that, I still believe running has a lot of powerful stories to tell.
Yeah.
And we those of us with a kind of responsibility to tell them haven't done it all yet, because there's always things to tell and talk about. And so there's a little bit of me which was have a responsibility to keep doing that. I think I can do that. And sometimes when you can do something, you should keep doing it. I love talking to people about their running. And so that's the second reason, well, I can continue to do it, but so I said, yeah, okay. And then I didn't have much of a, Dina Castor is the co-host of the Abbott World Marathon Majors version of Marathon Talk. And I think we're learning to work with each other. We're 7 episodes in. And Dina provides, a completely different lens through running. I put my foot in it like last week because I was like, yeah, have you ever done the World Cross? Yeah, she's only got a silver medal twice. Oops, sorry, Dina.
Oh, you've fallen to our level. Excellent.
Silver medalist at World Cross twice. Wow.
So is that what happened then? Did Abbott approach and say, like, we want to resurrect? We want to do a podcast, and it'd be great if we resurrected, or brought Marathon back in a different guise, or was the conversation different?
No, why have you stopped recording the show? And I said, I'm tired and I'm busy, and I can't do everything. So he said, well, what about if we take some of that pressure away from you? Would you like it to carry on? And that was it.
Actually, strangely, I was out with Dave on a gig on Wednesday. He does a social media for Abbott. So
okay, right, that was pretty much it. So we said yes, and there we go. I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go.
And how
I feel like we're feeling our way with it a little bit at the moment.
And what's the expectation on content and freedom in that respect?
So of course I don't have as much freedom as I used to have, but they're really good in that I could have a bit more, but of course so I don't have as much engagement in writing the show. So whereas, I don't have as much freedom to write the content, but if I want something in, I could probably put it in, but I tend to not. because that means that I'm doing more work, and I kind of like, I'm so busy at the moment with other work that it's hard, it's actually hard to find the bandwidth to do it. So I think it will, perhaps I'll get a bit more, but at the moment we're sort of finding our way. I'm enjoying the conversations. The focus is very different because it's like we want to bring, obviously Abbott have great access.
Yeah.
And that's something, you guys doing your own podcast, you'll know sometimes, it's not who it's not what you know, but who. And often doing the podcast for 10 years, I could pick the phone up to somebody and say, would you like to be on the show? And they would say, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
We only ever had a couple of people, and I'm not telling you who.
Steve Yvette and Seb K,
who said, I'll only come on if you pay me.
Oh, we've had that recently.
We've had that.
We've literally just had that funded.
Yeah.
Is this a funded opportunity?
We always say we'll give you a share of our profit.
Yeah.
Yes.
You get 100% of it.
100% of our profit from the episode. Yeah.
That's what we used to say was, yeah, sure. We'll give, you can have some free downloads.
And do you think they were right in asking for money from their position, from the benefit to them, benefit to you, expectations?
Not really, if I'm being honest. Not really. I think it comes from it. So it's quite difficult now. So, like if you're going to use the search, so if you're going to post a photograph, right, you should be acknowledging and potentially, and in often paying the photographer, and we see so much imagery used where the photographer doesn't even know that someone's used it. Would I pay someone to be on the show? Well, we made the rule that we wouldn't quite early on. So it doesn't actually matter who they were or what they'd done, not paying you. I think if they're used to working in media, obviously in some instances where they consider themselves to be talent, they would be paid. And so
really? Sorry, so, on the podcast, or
no. They would be paid by other media outlets. They would be paid by other media outlets.
Yeah.
So the media outlet would pay them. I'm trying to think if there was ever a case where we had like a sponsorship arrangement, and that would be the only time I think indirectly we may have paid a guest.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of something where like they had a sponsored athlete, and I would so probably back to the days of Adidas.
Yeah.
So like years ago, we had a partnership with Adidas, and that meant that we could speak to people like Wilson Kipsang or I can't remember the other guy's name, Patrick Mutai.
Patrick
Macau. And like it meant we could speak to those guys, but of course they were on retainers, and they probably maybe they wouldn't have spoken to us had they not had that brand relationship. So indirectly perhaps, but we never said, here's a check for like to come and be on the show. But we did have people ask. Yeah.
And is there an endpoint that gets renewed with Abbott? Like, are you tied in for a number? Is it just ongoing until?
No. So certainly for the rest of 2023, we'll be producing the show. And I think there's a review point at that point with an option for another year. I like the fact that Abbott want to kind of find ways to speak to their community of runners differently. That's the goal for them, is to, build a community. So they're kind of back at the start. And what we've done in the short term is carry things on in a sort of simplified, blended way to give it a little bit of continuity. The focus is still on an interview, and I'd like that to still be the case. we've got I would really love to have, a stronger breadth of interview on the show. I love the way a lot of the chair athletes race and perform. So 2 of our first 7 interviews have been with wheelchair athletes. And one of my all-time man crush interviews is with Kurt Fearnley. Did the interview years ago. Kurt Fearnley is just the most amazing athlete. And we always
I don't know Kurt actually out of interest. So what's his background?
He's Olympic, multiple major, and I think Olympic wheelchair marathon champion, Australian kind of absolute legend. He's done some incredible things, and his backstory is amazing around his growing up in rural outback Australia as a disabled child.
Oh wow, yeah.
And in his words, he would drag himself around the outback, and getting a chair and racing, and he's he is now an amazing Australian citizen. I think he's done, he does some incredibly high profile things in Australia.
Yeah.
He won all the majors, was breaking real barriers in wheelchair racing. And he's a top bloke, proper top bloke. So
yeah.
He's like my athlete kind of man crush.
Yeah.
Interviewing him was brilliant. And we want to continue to bring that focus to World Marathon Majors, but also to the show, as well as to keep telling stories of people that run. And that's the other thing is World Marathon Majors have access to people running across the globe.
Yeah.
And so if interesting stories come up, it's just, what an opportunity. That's the bit I love the most, to be able to talk to those people about how running has, supported, served, helped, benefited, transform their life. So that's what still excites me.
Well, we're going to get some questions. I'm aware we've taken up
rattled on
a fair bit of your time already. Yeah, exactly. We always do. I could chat to you for hours and hours. So just let's have a look. So actually, a lot of them are to do with actually the end of Marathon Talk and how it's changed. So.
You're trying to be tactful.
Yeah. No. So one from Neil was about do you find do you have to be a bit more guarded now what you say on Marathon Talk because of the link with the Marathon Majors?
I think I've always been considered because I think that's respectful to who I'm speaking to. But of course, it's now supported by World Marathon Majors and by Abbott. And so without that, I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't want to go back to doing all the editing. I'm not necessarily more guarded because I think I haven't been guarded, and there's no need to be more guarded. I can say it if I think it's relevant to say. Sometimes I think there might be stories that I wouldn't talk about because I just, so we've already had a conversation where sometimes I think people, what they're interested in is their own promotion.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, is that really of interest to the people listening? So would I be more guarded? No. Do I have to be more transparent, and do I have to be continually fair? Then yeah. But would I don't want to shy away from talking about important things. But I'm not going to go, I can't talk about that because, Abbott tell us no. What we would do is we would have a conversation about it.
And does it feel like
we would talk about it?
Say again?
We would chat. We would go, is this something we can talk about on the show? How do we pitch it so that it's in the right voice and says the right things? Yeah.
And do you feel you can talk as much about your own personal experience at the moment with it almost being partly someone else's brand on the front, but also you haven't got that personal relationship with with Dina as much as you have.
Yeah,
with,
no, we're probably.
Holly or Tom.
So that is something I'm working on.
Yeah.
I think that that's also the kind of person I am. It's certainly the kind of person you guys are. It's pretty informal. For me, I don't want. So I'll give you a really good example of the kind of conversation that Dina and I might have. And Dina, for your listeners who don't know, is like probably one of the US most decorated distance runners. She's got a 2:19 marathon PB. She held the American record for the best part of 20 years. She's medaled at the Olympic Games and twice at the World Cross Country Championships, as she told me.
As I discovered.
Yeah. Whoa, have you? Wow. And there's no end to your talents, Dina. But I want to hear. So Dina often does some amazing things because of her background and the things she has achieved in her running. So she would go and do some commentary. So she did the commentary at the New York City Marathon. And I'm like, Dina, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm not going to get to do that. Like, people, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that as an experience for you, because that's what people want to hear.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily want to hear the race story. I can read about that. What brings people to the show, and I think what will be the future of Abbott World Marathon Majors Marathon Talk is that we can tell that story. So I said to Dina, like, tell me something interesting that happened. Like, don't tell me what happened in the race. Tell me something interesting that happened to you. That's what. And so she recounts this story of when the truck nearly careered into Edna Kiplagat, right? And of course, nobody would know that.
Yeah.
But everyone's like, oh, wow, I'd never have known that would have happened. And I said, Dina, go down to breakfast. And when you go down to breakfast, like, just give me a sense of what that's like.
Yeah.
Because you're sat there at breakfast with, some of the the world's best marathoners about to run the streets of New York. What's the feel? Like, what are you feeling like? Who are you seeing? Give me eyes where I can otherwise not see.
Yeah.
And help me experience that. And so that's something I'm really keen to draw out of on the show as we move it forward. Get a bit more out of the relationship, and I think that will come. And
then we've had this question a few times. I'm sure you get it all the time. Given 6 months perfect training, what would your mile time be at the moment?
Great question. I'm tilting. I'm just get higher and higher and higher. The sun's going up and up in my head. God, I've asked that question a lot. No one's ever asked it to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And actually, before you answer, you've got time to answer. Which of the guests? Because there's some guests when I've heard them say their time, and I think, come on, mate, no chance.
And I have to sit there and go, yeah, right. So my time now. So I have a Tom would tell me off for sandbagging at this point, but like, whenever I try and run fast, I get a bit of an Achilles flare up. I snapped my Achilles back in 1998 at the trials, the Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur, and it took quite a while to recover. I did recover. So even though I snapped my Achilles,
how do you snap an Achilles in? What built up to that?
Water jump in a steeplechase. It was the last water jump, and I was on for me what was a PB. I think I was on for about 8:45. Yeah, and I landed on because it's on an incline. So obviously to carry the water, it's like goes down into a trough. I landed on that slope and just put my Achilles into overstretch, and it snapped. So I had what's called a full rupture, an oblique rupture like that. So it twisted and snapped. And so I had to have like a full surgical repair. And Achilles repairs have moved on a lot since 1998. And now they do a lot more dynamic repair, whereas then it was in a plaster for 12 weeks, fixed in equinus, which is like pointy toe. But I did come back from it and still raced internationally afterwards, top 10 in the national, bagged a sub 30-minute 10K, won a couple of elite national multi-sport kind of duathlon and triathlon champs and stuff like that. But snapping an Achilles tendon was a right pain.
Yeah.
What did you ask me? And so as a result, what happens is when I train now, my Achilles tendon flares up when I do sharp speed stuff. But I really like doing it because I love the way like 3-minute runs rinse you, particularly when you push yourself like to the point of blood in your mouth.
And you feel so good afterwards.
It's just compared to that brilliant feeling of like walloping a session. I love it. But I'm just not quite as good at responding at it. So if I was able to do 6 months of kind of very perfect training where I was allowed to do that, even some of that, I reckon I could get down to about four.
The next digit's the important one.
4:45.
4:45. Okay.
Maybe. I did try this a couple of years ago. I ran 5. I think I did this Strava mile and I ran like 5:20 or something on a track. Like getting absolutely battered by Hannah England. And I think I did it a year before in about 4:55, but that must have been about 8 years ago.
When you did that Strava mile, did it feel like the thousands of listeners were all watching?
Yeah, and it was hideous as well. Like I was really unprepared for it. And Liz and I bowled up to Highgate, the track at the event that Ben Poachy puts on, like the 10,000 meter PBs.
Yeah.
And we'd literally driven up from Dorset and I had like 5 minutes before the start of the race. So my warm up was legging it from the car in Highgate down to the track, jumping on and go. But I'd go 4:45 at a stretch.
Another question.
Wait. I know. I just want to, while we're talking about races and times, I just want to jump in with a question about something, because when you sent over like list of achievements and things like that,
that's a long blurb.
That was a long blurb. And it was great. There's a few things that we can pick up in there, but I love it. But the one thing that I picked up here that we think is, once tried to run 630 miles along the Southwest Coastal Path. I like the fact that you've included it, even though you once tried to do it rather than completed it. There's got to be a story behind it.
Yeah, the amount of things I've tried, mine.
Let's not go down that road, okay? Because regular listeners of Marathon Talk will know I harped on about that run for absolutely ages. It became a little bit of a standing joke.
Is that your bugbear?
It's like, yeah, no, not really. I love it. It's like, do you remember, when you meet someone and they go, have I told you about the time I, you go, only about 5,000 times, you're going to wax on again. So, yes, I once tried to run the length of the Southwest Coast Path, 630 miles, and couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for a variety of complicated reasons. One was that I just ballsed up all of the logistics, and I tried to get from a certain point to a certain point, which on the Southwest Coast Path is bloody hard. Like about 30 to 40 miles a day. And I kind of like had accommodation at the end point. And so if you didn't make it at any one point, and some days I was destroyed. And what I needed to do was have some flexibility in my schedule. So I learned tons around, achieving like a 600-mile run. I think I ran 260 miles in the first 7 days, I think.
Nice. Given the case path,
the terrain is brutal. But at the same time, I'd underestimated the logistics of a support team. So, like my dad, I thought it'd be a really good bonding exercise for me and my dad to do. I didn't realize that my dad, suffered from a significant amount of anxiety at the time, and that it was just impossible for him to do. And I thought it would be a really rewarding experience for both of us, and it just turned out into a nightmare. And I had to bring him home. After amazing. Like 10 hours on a trail, like broken, thinking just like can't wait to get to the finish point because my dad's going to be there with something to eat and drink. So I'm like, and he's not there. And he goes like, oh, sorry, I couldn't park, so I'm 3 miles away.
Jog it in.
Amazing.
Like, I could only park here. And you just think to yourself, okay, I have to really understand, like, because when you've got 38 miles in your legs and you've been running for 10 hours, that extra mile is largely unpleasant.
And emotionally as well, you're not prepared for it, right?
And you've got to stay in a camper van, and you're like so it was a no. And then Liz tried to pick it up with me, and I've got 3 kids. The boys were 18 months at the time old. So we tried to camp with three kids 4 and under. Like me run and her set a tent and it just like got a nightmare. It just all got too much. So I packed it in after I think 15 days. And like look, you guys know you learn a lot through failure. So that's why I put it in the way in which I did. Because I was super conscious that you asked me for the things I'd done in running, and I was like, yeah, okay, I've done this, and people bang on about all those things before, don't they? So it's like I also tried to do this, but it just went, it went wrong. Yeah. And that's as important to talk about as things that, oh yeah, it all looks amazing. It all looks amazing. All looks amazing. It's not an Instagram kind of, aren't I, bloody amazing. It's not that at all. Sometimes life just throws you a colossal curveball and you have to deal with it.
Is there unfinished business?
So I will go back and do it again, but not in that way.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to
have you got
stop. I'll probably do it with Liz. We'll wait for the kids to not be so dependent on us, and we'll smoke and drink our way around. Probably.
That's the way to do it.
And last one, favorite ever guest.
It's really hard because it's really difficult that I already said Kurt Fernley, and I love talking to Kurt, and I can't see the list of people that we had. We also were, privileged to have the likes of Ron Hill for a couple of interviews, and I forgot who interviewed Ron. And I went, oh yeah, I interviewed Ron once. I loved it. And Tom went, you didn't interview him at all. I interviewed him. I was like, oh really? Oh yeah. Sorry, mate.
I asked some great questions. He loved me.
Yeah, me and
we really
Ron,
hit it
off. Brothers. No. Chris Brasher was an amazing guest. And what I loved about that was the context which surrounded him being the guest. Sorry, not Chris Brasher, Chris Chataway.
Oh, okay.
Chris Chataway. I was thinking of Bannister, Brasher, Chataway. And Chris Chataway paced Roger Bannister to that first sub 4 minute mile, right? And went to the Olympics and was this kind of this icon in the 50s, but then also moved into sport and presenting and, very entrepreneurial and a lot of stuff he does. And his sons, Adam and Matt, were listeners to the show. And they emailed us and they reached out and they said, look, nobody knows this yet. I'm pretty certain we've shared this before, but if we haven't, this will be news. They got in touch and their dad, they said, look, of course, we were familiar with who Chris Chataway was in his iconic status within running. And they said, look, our dad's not got long to live. And he's poorly and no one knows yet, but we would like somebody to create an audio record with him. And so would you do it? And that was, Tom and I were absolutely blown away.
It's a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah, by the notion of someone's asked us to talk to their dad who's terminally ill about their life in running. And we felt like what a privilege that was. What a privilege to be asked to do that. And we ummed and ahed about who was going to get that opportunity. Tom did it in the end. He was always better at interviews.
He does all the good ones, isn't he?
But there's been 600 episodes, 600 different interviews is a lot. So I think those are probably some of the standouts for me. Yeah.
And how can we promote and help Stormbreak in some way? Kind of just
put this up like this now, won't I? Look, I'm sorry, guys, I've got completely lost it.
It's great. It's great.
Look, it's like I'm slowly going underwater.
It gives you a kind of a glow as well. It's like this kind of angelic glow.
Like that. There you go. I've got it now. I've had too much ready break.
I've desperately got to get for a pee. I'll be back in a second. I'm sorry. Continue without me.
Yeah, this is even better. Now you guys are like,
oh, that's
and he's
amazing.
left his mic on. So Jody, if we're quiet, if we be super quiet, we might just hear the tinkle of water.
He's done that before. He's done that loads of times. He'll go off and he'll always got parcels. He's out. He'll stand there. He'll have a chat with the person delivering the parcels. Then forget he's actually recording a podcast. And then go off and make a cup of tea and kind of wander past the room and kind of go, oh yeah, there you are.
Yeah, we have had some amazing. I'm not going to tell you who, but times like that too, particularly on occasions like this. So we used to do video before. So when we first started recording, we just used Skype, right? And it was just audio. And then you could also have video calls, right? So we were recording one male icon of running, whose achievements are outstanding. And his wife's like milling around in the background in a dressing gown, like in the kitchen. And we didn't want to say anything, but we're like, we can see, his pre-Zoom calls and it's like, look,
the etiquette hasn't been, the etiquette and the protocol hasn't been set at this point.
Yeah, please just keep the dressing gown on. Please keep the dressing gown on. Otherwise, we're going to have to say something.
You haven't seen what Liz has been doing behind you. Flashing
what were you saying again?
And is there, I guess,
what can I promote?
Round off, how can we help Stormbreak? How can we promote? How can we
I think
involved in?
That's a really nice offer. I think that the thing I'm doing most at the moment is I'm trying to help children understand how movement can support their mental and physical health. And so in 2018, I founded a charity called Stormbreak that I named Stormbreak. And we work with trusted adults that support young children aged 4 to 11 so they can embed movement into their lives. It doesn't have to be like running, lots of different ways of moving. So that moving can help them learn to manage their emotions, and learn to regulate their behavior and learn to recognize when they need help. Because we know as people that move that it's really good. It really does help. Which is why you feel frustrated when you can't do it. But we should be teaching children that movement is such a powerful mechanism to help them regulate their emotions and support their mental health, particularly at the moment. So our demand, we've supported over 30,000 kids now in the last 3 years. And we run programs in schools, we run programs with looked after children in foster care and adoption services. We run programs within primary care through doctor's surgeries. And it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. I thought Marathon Talk was hard, but this has been really hard. Okay. I've not got a charity background. Didn't know
organization wise or kind of emotionally.
Both. Yeah, it's hard starting something new. So starting a new movement and a new charity called Stormbreak. I think the best way you could help is if there's anyone listening that works with kids in a kind of commissioning or an education point of view and thinks we know this is something we need to support, and we've seen an incredible rise in the need for children's support. So we were doing this pre-pandemic, and it was a bit like trying to explain to people what a podcast was. It's a bit like children's mental health. Why is that important? That was the what you want about. And it's because of my PhD 20 years ago was about how can you help children use physical activity to support their well-being? What are the things we need to do? And now, 20 years ago, I'm putting that into play in a real world that really needs it. The pandemic placed children's mental health, right at the forefront of a lot of agendas. And we genuinely are in a crisis. So I've moved away from a lot of running stuff, largely because this is a priority, and our children need it, and someone's got to do it. So that's what we're doing. Yeah, we're now a team of 10. We've got programs all over the country in primary schools. We're looking to grow more. We need funding and support and help. So yeah, anything with stormbreak.org.uk would be lovely.
And is it just not being provided at all, or in schools, or not well enough?
It's been so. We've got a partnership with the NHS locally in Dorset, and we ran a conference on Wednesday to do with the need of children, and one of the keynotes was the head of children's services in Dorset for mental health, and she said this, and it really struck me. She's like, what the pandemic did for adults at the time, adults were very fearful, very worried, and it really, it threatened a lot of people, right? And the cost to adult lives and the risk to adult lives at the time of the pandemic was significant. But for children, the risk was relatively low, right? Like relatively, it was a small number of children, relatively low. Now, the risk and the cost of the pandemic to children is high. It's really high. And we're feeling it now. Whereas, of course, adults are like, well, we're back to work. Not all of them, I admit. Yeah. But, the risk levels have just gone like that. And so, the waiting lists for support for children with anxiety, with neurodiverse issues, with, just struggles is... I was on a call before I spoke to you guys, that the wait list was a year to get some help. A year, so I felt like it's just not good enough. So,
and a year for a child is massive, isn't it? Like a year for an adult is a long time, but a year for a child, the impact that has.
Yeah. So, what can we to do this? What can we, we were like, what can we do to do something about it? So yeah, I set up Stormbreak, and yeah, we're off and running. So thank you for that little shout. I appreciate it.
And if people wanted to be involved in a financial way, they can Google, but in a non-financial way, what type of skilled people are you looking for that would help?
Well, spreading the word's really helpful. So, teachers, people that work in primary schools, getting us in to that primary school so that we can help the staff tackle some of the issues that they're facing. Primary school teachers are under huge pressure at the moment with kids. Also, digital skills, like we've got quite a digital foundation, and those digital skills are expensive to try and buy, so anything, just like, I think one thing that anyone can do is, if a child who's struggling, is you can validate their feelings and come to their level. It's a practical thing for anybody who works with kids or knows kids or who just comes into experience with them. If you get a feeling that they're unhappy, like, take time to pay attention, really listen and give them your time and your attention, and value how they feel by validating what they tell you. You don't ignore them, just listen and hear them. And that's a simple thing that anyone can do that doesn't cost anything. And in doing that, you're giving that child a chance to be heard and a chance to seek some help.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, amazing message to end on, and I thank you for coming on the podcast. If you ever want to come back, we'll still be in our rooms waiting for
waiting. We haven't even asked you for the secrets of getting sponsorship or listeners or anything else, so we haven't even touched on that.
Anytime. Tap me up.
And if there's anything we can do to help you guys in the future, then just let us know.
Thank you. Enjoy your podcasting.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Martin. Take care. Oh, I love that.
That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I've met Martin a few times before. In the past, I've been one of those needy people saying, "Get me on the podcast," years ago.
Oh, I see. Amazing.
But I've sensed and I've heard from other people throughout the time we've been around as Bad Boy Running that I think he's been a bit wary of us, and just concerned potentially that we'd be taking the piss, or we'd be we wouldn't be as supportive as I think we are. So it's nice to actually finally have an episode where we can still be friends and be like, "This is great. This is all we ever wanted."
The whole thing was just to be friends with you.
Yeah.
Didn't you understand? We didn't really want a podcast.
Yeah. We can now retire.
No, exactly. So I think that was really good. And we didn't ask the question though, did we? Have you listened to an episode?
Have you listened? Yes. Yeah. That I did see that and think, should I ask it? Because it's quite.
It's the one. It's a difficult one because you
wouldn't want to lie.
The journalist, no, exactly. You wouldn't lie. And as a journalist, you never when it's like film journalist, never asked the person being interviewed. Never asked the question, "Have you seen the film?" Like, is that you put someone on the spot?
It's the Adele question, right? Where the guy says that the album didn't turn up. I don't know. No one sent it to me, and then he gets ridiculed by her and
exactly, that's it. So it's you just don't ask that question. But
maybe this will be the first one he listens to, but given how busy he is, I suspect not. So
I love the fact that the Southwest Coastal Pass was an in-joke. That's the thing.
And he's right. It's probably has as formative effect on his experience in running as anything else.
That's a great idea, actually. Like, get people to have their CV of failure. I don't want to have all the races that you finished or done. I want to hear all the races that you fucked up, that it went wrong, that you didn't complete.
That's going to be our new question. What's top of your failure CV? Right, that's going to be our new lexicon.
I like the idea, but I mean, like, that's something for the do badders to do. Like, what does your failure CV look like? Because I bet it's fascinating. Actually,
I think you say, I bet it's long. I bet it's massive.
No.
Well, that was everything I kind of hoped for, and it's nice because actually, I think we can ask questions in a different way to potentially other people because of our experience of having done podcasts ourselves for so long, and knowing so many people that he knows. But do better. Who else would you like us to interview? Message me, david@badboyrunning.com, and we'll go out and get them. And if you'd love to leave us a nice review, what should the keyword be today?
Vodka skull.
Vodka skull, yes. He's clearly got some resolve not to have drunk it before now. Vodka skull. So do leave us a review with that in the title.
Or Yelling Wreath. Vodka skull or Yelling Wreath. That's the Yelling Wreath. Okay, it sounds like a villain, doesn't it? It sounds like a villain from a thing. Yes. Yeah. Yelling Wreath. He was responsible for this. Yeah, I think that's a good name.
And we're going to ask in the group, what's top of your failure CV? So get in there and give us your answers. We'll read about next time.
Amazing.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you soon.
See you later.
Bye. Oh, I forgot to say, actually, we normally do other ones to recommend. We've interviewed Holly Rush before. That was brilliant. She was talking all about influencers and managing the ASICS community. Which other podcast? We've got the 10 Junk Miles crossover, which is wow. That is a fairly unique episode where we get very, very drunk.
And I was thinking about was it Matt Davis from the OCR podcast in the US as well. We spoke to him. Actually, I recalled him today just before we got on this podcast. Actually, I say we should catch up with him because that was a great interview.
That was really fun, actually. Yeah, he doesn't hold back.
No, he really doesn't.
Well, there we go. We've added it in now. That's just it, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye 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 bye.
Fuck you, buddy.